In this next lesson, we will talk about the viewport width and viewport height. So let's go create a new file here, CSS units part 4, viewport.html, and let's go create another template here. Let's go and call it CSS units part 4, viewport width and height. So let me just go and enlarge this here. Just remember that when we say viewport width and viewport height, each of these CSS units will be equivalent to at least 1% of the viewport. So if it's the viewport width, this will be equivalent to 1%. Viewport width will be, let's say, 50 VW here, will be 50% of the whole viewport of the device screen. So if we say div class, not class here, VH, and we put here viewport height of 50 VH, this will be 50% of the whole screen or the whole device screen. So remember that let me go and put here a comment here, so at least we will be able to know that 1 VW is equals to 1% of the viewport and viewport width specifically. And here, let me just go and copy this, and what we're going to do here is that it will be 1% of the viewport height. Now let's go and add some CSS here, so at least we'll be able to identify here. But let's create another box declaration here, and I would want to put both of these elements inside of a box. I would want them to have a box.vw. At least we'll have an element, a block. So we have the block here, and then the element. Now I want to go and have give it a background color of let's say yellow. Okay, let me just open this up in our file explorer here, and let's see what will happen here. Okay, so this did not work here. Background color box. And that's the reason why, as I've told you, we need to have a style tag, guys. So you have to be keen in finding the bugs in your program. So we were able to find it. Now we have viewport width 50 VW and viewport height 50 VH. So let's go and try to give some height and width for our two divs here, but let's go and give it some margin first, at least 20 pixels, so at least they will be separated from one another. So we now have them separated from each other here. Now that we were able to separate this, just for demonstration purposes, let's go and give the viewport width a width of 50 VW as we've declared here. Okay, this should not be a semicolon. Viewport width, and I would want to apply some styling in our body element. So let's go and apply some styling, background color of green, and I don't want any margin, so 0. So let's see what will happen here. Now we don't have any margin in our body element here, which is the parent element of our document. Now if we go and try to just make this margin bottom, let's save that and then refresh this. We can now see that we have the viewport width to 50 VW. Now if we try to go and create another div here that will have the box class also and box percentage, which will be viewport 50%. Let's see what will be the equivalent value of this. Let's just put it up here. So let's go and dot box percentage here, and then see what will be the result. Let's save that and refresh. Let's see what happened here. So we can see that the viewport here is 50%. And if we try to go and change this and we make this 100% and this into 100% or 100 VW, you would see that it will occupy the same space that will be occupying the whole viewport or the screen. Now, if I want to go and overlap the screen, or let's say exceed the screen here that we have here, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go and change this to 125, and you would see that a scroll bar will appear below our document here, because that just means that our viewport width is exceeding the 100% of the viewport of the screen. So if you're having a problem with, for example, your website is having a scroll bar appearing here, you might be encountering a problem with the declaration of the viewport width and height, or the percentage of the width and height of your element. So let me just go and bring this back to 100 viewport width and refresh. You would see that the scroll bar now here disappeared because we were able to insert our viewport here. Specifically, the 100 viewport width value that we declared here will be exactly the screen size. So just remember, one viewport width will be equivalent to 1% of the viewport of the whole screen. So if I go and change this to 50 again, that will be 50% of the viewport width. And if we go and give this a 1 viewport width, you would see that it's a very small size now here, the size of our element here. So again, let's go back to 50 viewport width here. So if we go and refresh, you would see now that it's occupying half of the screen that we have here. So if I go and now try to do the VH here, it will be the same, everyone. So just remember that the viewport height will be equivalent to 1% of the height of the whole viewport. So if I say 50 viewport height here, okay, so that's height, status height, viewport height, and refresh this, you would see that this is 50% of our viewport here that we have here. So it will be 50%. And if we go and try to, let's say 25 VH here, 25 VH, refresh, so it will be equivalent to 25% of the whole viewport height. What I want to do next here will be to go and copy all of this and create a div container from where I would want to place them and put them inside, and then save. Now let's go and try to apply some styling here. So for the container, I want to have it with a color, background color red. Okay, background color red here. So let's see, refresh. We can now see that there's a background color red here, and I want it to have a height of, let's say, 30 VH, 40 VH. So you would see that it's exceeding here. And now we have here, let's say 70 VH. You'll see that there's a scroll bar that appeared here. So let's just go for 60 VH here, or 55 VH. So at least it won't be having a scroll bar. Okay, so we can see now that there's a 55 VH value here for the height of the container. What I want to do next here is to give this a width value of 50 VW. Now let's try to go and observe what will happen once we try to go and save this and then try to refresh. So we can see here that the width viewport width here that we gave the container made the size of our element here half of the viewport when we tried to resize the browser. So we know that once we try to go and resize this, you would see it will stay 50% or half of the browser, or the size of the browser display here. Right now we resize it up to this point, and we can see that it's still half. It's showing us here that there's a half display of the element because we gave it a viewport width of 50 VW. Just so that we will be able to compare it here, you would see that we also have a VW here that has a 50 VW value, and I would want to give this another class name because we know that the div box VW class name here is applying here inside of the container, the element inside of the container that contains the same class name here, and that value is also being applied here with the element that is inside of the body element. We know that the div here on top that contains the class name or that executes the value of with 50 VW has the body element as its parent element, while this other div here that also references the style declaration that we have here has the container div as its parent element. So we would want to go and apply different styling here so that we would know what's the difference between the div element that is inside of a div container from the div element that is targeting the body element as its parent element. So let's go and create a class name here that will be having a modifier. So let's say I would want to use color blue here, and here down here I would want to use a different color that will just signify here the difference between the two div elements with a 50 VW value property for the width. So let's go and use pink. Now let's go and go up here and declare a background color blue and another one that will have a background color of pink. Let's save that and refresh. And now we can see that these are two different divs that has the same value for the width property of 50 VW. Now if I try to go and try to apply a higher value for the width for the VW pink here and give it a 70 VW, let's see what will happen. You would see that it overlapped the container. So we can see here that this exceeded the height of the container here. So it's not depending on the size of the container, but it's depending on the size of the screen that we have here that displays the content of the browser. So as we can see here, we have resized it and it's adjusting based from the viewport width of the display of the browser. Now let's try to go and compare this with the viewport divs that we have here for the box percentage. Okay, let's have a box 1, percentage 1, percentage 2. So at least we'll have some sort of modifier that will identify the difference between percentage 1 here. Let me just copy this and then give it a percentage 2 example. So both have 100%. Now if I go decrease this to 50%, the div that we have here, so let me give it a background color of brown. Let's refresh. And let's also go and give this a background color of aqua and change the width to 50%. Let's see how that will look on our browser. So you would see there's a difference between the div with the percentage class. We have here the div element that has the box percentage modifier 2 that has a background color of brown, and the width is being referenced based from its parent container, which is the div container that we have here. On the other hand, the box percentage 1 that we have here with the background color aqua is referencing the body element, which is the parent element of the div element that has the class name percentage 1 here. So I'm just showing you here some examples of possible situations that you might encounter when you use percentage versus the viewport width and the viewport height values here or units here. So if I try to go and make this 70%, the div element that is inside of our container here with the red background, let's see if it will be exceeding the size of our div container with the background red. So let's go and refresh this. You would notice here that even though we gave it a 70% value here, it's not exceeding the size of the element container with the background red, because again, this is based relative to the parent container. Here in this case, this is relative to the body element. However, the viewport width will be relative to the, as explained here, 1% of the viewport width itself, or the size of the browser once you try to resize it. Or let's say, for example, the device that you're using, for example, let's go and use the devices here, and we have here some examples of different devices. Let's say an iPad. It will be 50% of the viewport width of the iPad. It will be 50% of the viewport width of the device iPhone. Here we have Galaxy S9, and you would see here that the div with the viewport width value for its width property is resizing its size based from the device width or the device viewport. I'm hoping you're getting the idea here with regards to the difference between the use of the percentage relative value and the viewport width and viewport height values here. So at least you will be able to know when to use them once you're already developing your sites based from the rules of responsive web design. So that will be all for this lesson, and thank you, and see you on our next lessons.